Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of the Florida Sound Archive podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Kaiser. And for today's episode, I have on with me a very special guest. He's been doing his thing for a long time, and he is an amazing talent, great voice. I'm so excited to have him on. Mel Williams out of South Florida. Mel, welcome into the podcast.
It's good to see you, man. Jeff, it's my pleasure to talk with you finally. Finally. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It is a pleasure to talk to you. I know that Eddie Hill from Mirror, he got us connected here. So I got to just give a shout out to Eddie. How long do you go back? How long you and Eddie go back?
Oh, my goodness. We go back probably 20, 25 years or more because parts of his group started out with me way back in the day.
Way back.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because although the circle may have been small, it could also be quite broad with a lot
Yeah,
of people who
yeah.
sometimes you don't even know other people in that same circle.
Exactly, exactly. One of my singers, one of the singers that he called me his godfather. I mentored him. His name was we call him Dollar Bill Ferguson, but Dollar Bill was with a group of mine that was called the Soul Providers way back in the day, and he finally broke up with the Soul Providers and ended up with Eddie and those guys. So this is how I got to know Eddie and his group. Mhm.
Isn't that poster behind you at the Roman pub wasn't with that the Soul Providers?
That was with the Soul Providers. And I got to tell you, Clarence Carter, I opened for Clarence Carter. That was back in, I want to say 2001, 2001. And the Soul Providers, those guys were so much fun. You had Charlie Toner. We had the horns, and we used to call them the screaming hyenas. And we had Charlie Toner. We got our bass player. He passed away. Our drummer passed away, but Charlie Toner is still out there, and he doesn't do a whole lot of music anymore. But Charlie Toner was with the Soul Providers, and he brought me in with the Soul Providers. And the reason I'm with the Soul Providers because there was a guy by the name of Bobby Springer who was going all over the place doing songs everywhere with him, but he got big and he had his own band. So the Soul Providers needed a singer, and they Bobby Springer asked me to sit in with the Soul Providers. So that's how it all worked. Bobby Springer, let me say, he's gone too, but he was a soul man from South Florida, and he did all over the place, and he was one of my mentors back in the day. So I just want to let you a little shout out to Bobby Stringer.
Yeah, I'm glad you shared that. And what a cool story to open up for such a soul legend like
Oh my
Clarence
goodness.
Carter.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Very kind gentleman, very nice man. I had so much fun that night. I can't I can't thank the production people who was allowed to put that together right there in Miami Gardens. Miami Gardens, by the way, it used to be called Carol City. It's now Miami Gardens, which is one of the largest Black communities in Florida, and it was founded by our the mayor at the time. Her name was Shirley Gibson, who was a dear friend of mine. And Shirley Gibson, she started the work to change the name of the community from Carol City to Miami Gardens, and right there is where we did all of our show. Miami Gardens, it has the stadium, the football stadium, and the racetrack. So this is where we did all of our stuff right there.
Wow, I didn't know that history about Miami Gardens and that the name was different. I did
Oh
not know that.
yes, yes, it used to be called. It was Carol City forever. And I want to say somewhere in the late 90s, uh, we changed the name from Carol City to Miami Gardens, and it was the brainchild of Shirley Gibson. So I want to give a little shout out and she's gone now, but to Shirley Gibson, who was the first mayor. We call her the mother of Miami Gardens.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Nice history lesson right there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you weren't actually born in South Florida, right? So
No,
talk about some of your earliest years and memories you can remember, Mel, growing up.
oh, what a story! What a story! I was born in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and that was way back in the early '50s, the '50s. The thing about Oak Ridge, it was cold. It snowed, and you get snow. But my father and my mother, we lived in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. My father, my dad, was a maintenance man. He was how could I put it, a maintenance man who worked at different venues, different churches, and he was the maintenance man. He was also the janitor at some of these places. And after they would have events in their hall, in their community halls, Dad would come in and after the shows or after the events, and he would go in and clean up the place. And there was a church called the First Methodist Church of Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And my daddy was the janitor there. And my dad would take me as a little fella, to with him to go help clean up the place. Dad would get up in the pulpit. There was a microphone, and Dad would get up in the pulpit, and Dad would sing. And I would sit at the pews and just listen to my dad sing. And I said, I want to be just like him. And this is a true story, man. I want to be just like him. I remember the pastor, and I remember his wife. Now, this was, remember, in the early 50s in Deep South. This was a white church. The pastor, his name was Dr. Bays, and his wife was Miss Bays. They would come to my mom's and my dad's house with their daughter, and they would come to our house on a Sunday afternoon, and they would come and just visit us. And they would just come and talk with my parents, and I guess this was ministering. He did it, and I learned a lesson from that. I was a little black boy, but I picked up on something about this guy. And this was in the 50s now. This was in the 50s in the Deep South. And my dad and the pastor they were friends. He worked for him. But Dad would also sing after they did all of the cleaning. He would get up and sing. And I noticed I want to be like him one day. And that's the story about my dad and the pastor at that church in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. My mother was from Memphis. That's how they got together. Anyway, my mother was from Memphis, and her brother was a pastor. My uncle, his name was Henry Epps, and he was a pastor in the 60s. Guess what? He lived exactly about, I want to say about 2 miles from Stax Recordings. 2 miles. And when we lived in Florida, we moved to Florida in the early 60s. We moved to Florida, and my mother wanted me to go live with my uncle because in Tennessee and Memphis, it was popping. There was all kind of music going, all kind of things happening. And my mother said, Melvin, I know you can sing. Why don't we let you go live with your uncle? And if you go live with your uncle, they can help you to get hooked up with all of those famous people, and they can help you be a star. I said, Mama, and this is a true story, Jeff. I'll never forget it. I told my mother, Mama, I don't want to leave you. She said, but you just go away and you'll be famous. I said, Mama, I don't want to be famous if I can't be with you. I want to be with you. I want to live with you. That's a true story, man. So, Dad, we lived in a place called Naranja, Florida, and there my dad was a maintenance man at a place called Isle of Gold Trailer Park, right there in Naranja, off of US 1. And we were kids, and Dad would clean up the rec hall, the recreation hall, and all of those things. And they would have a bingo night. And they knew I could sing. Mother said, why don't you let him go sing on there? So help me, I winded up one night going with my dad, and I would always go to help him clean up around that place. But one night, Daddy had me go with him to the bingo hall with all of these people in this trailer park, and he threw me up there in front of all of those folks. And he says, "You got to sing. You got to sing them a song." And I said, okay. I stood up in front of all of those folks and I sang in front of all of those people. And the amazing thing happened. They started giving me money. They started giving me nickels and dimes and quarters and dollars. And I winded up with, they had this big bucket and they started putting money in there. And they pat me on my head and said, "He's such a beautiful boy. He's such a nice boy." I Lord Jesus. And I was scared, but I liked what I saw. And that's when I got the bug. That's when I got the bug. Man.
What song did you sing?
I think you remember the Righteous Brothers, Unchained Melody.
Of course.
I think that's, yeah. I believe that's what I sing because my voice hadn't changed.
Right.
I could hit the high note.
It's perfect.
Oh, so I sang the song and the people, oh, he's wonderful, blah, 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 blah. And so that's when I got the bug, man. And I've been chasing the bug. I'll always say, I didn't find music. I think music found me. Entertainment found me, and I've been stuck in it ever since.
Right. Well, I mean, it's a great story, and you started off really young. And I want to actually share a picture, if I can, of your family. Can you tell us a little about this photo?
Oh my God! Well, there's Dad. As you can see, he's cool. He was cool back then. My dad was a member of a family of fellows that were about 5 or 6 boys. They all played instruments and they all sang. And Daddy could sing. Daddy was a singer. To my right, to my left was my sister Mamie, and right down below, right there in the middle, is my sister Norma Jean, whose birthday was just yesterday. So I want to say happy birthday, Norma. And up top is my mom. And there's my dear sister Gwendolyn. And right over there in the corner was moi, Mel Williams, soon to be, that was Melvin Williams, soon to be Mel Williams.
So you had 3 sisters and you were the only boy.
Well, at that time.
At that time.
Okay. At that time. That's in Tennessee. And there was one more sister that was born in Tennessee, and her name is Wanda. By the way, her name is Wanda, or she goes by the name of Wanda Brooks, but she has not a podcast, but a TV show in Montgomery, Alabama. It's called Party Nights. So she does things in Montgomery, Alabama, and her name is Wanda Brooks, and she does what is called Party Nights.
Now, did they have any influence on you musically?
We all sang. Mother and us would all sit around the house and sing together. And Daddy, Dad was out somewhere trying to make ends the best way he could. And then Mother would have us all sitting around and we would all sing. There was some time, and Jeff, I got to tell you, that we had some pretty rough times as kids. When we came to Florida, there was, it was rough. There was times when we all lived in a one-room house, and we all lived together. And there was times when the lights actually got turned off. And what we would have to do, we would have candles. Mother would have candles or lanterns, and we'd all sit around the candles and the lantern, and we'd all sing. And this was our way to ease the stress. Mother had the wisdom to allow us to sing to relieve the frustration of. There was one time, and I got to tell you, it was so, we were, I don't want to say poor, but we didn't have a whole lot. I would walk home from school. We had what was called flip flops. This is what you can only wear. What we could only afford was flip flops to school. And one time I was coming home from school, and the doggone flip flop broke. And walking home, and the kids all laughed at me because my flip flop broke, and I had to walk home barefooted. But I promised myself, one of these days I won't have to wear flip flops. And now I don't wear flip flops anymore. I wear floor shines. Yeah. But I just wanted to say there was rough times as a kid in elementary school. This is how it kind of all started. There was a teacher. Her name was Miss Courtney, and I'm friends with her daughters. And now my third grade teacher, and that's her right there. That's her, Miss Courtney. I love her. God bless her. She's gone on, but that was my teacher. My third grade teacher, and she knew that I could sing, and she inspired me. She got me to doing plays in school and singing. Right here, actually, this picture, I was a part of a group that had the impressions, the original impressions. We performed with the original impression. Curtis Mayfield and the impression. Curtis was gone, but the remaining impressions were alive. And there was my teacher right there, Miss Courtney. And I just want to say, I love you, Miss Courtney, because of you. You helped inspire me to go ahead and sing and keep on. She was a singer as well. And her daughter, her name is Jan Courtney, a great singer. And we used to sing together, me and Jan. But Miss Courtney, I love you. And thank you for the inspiration that you gave me. Yeah, that's another story. Anyway, on and on and on. I sang. Daddy would have me go up to the trailer park and sing, and Miss Courtney, she inspired me to sing. So that's pretty much what's going on with my singing as a kid.
So it's great to hear about the inspiration you got from your third grade teacher,
Yeah,
Miss Courtney, because it's those memories that a lot of us may have going
yeah,
back to those one or two teachers that really did play a pivotal role as
right.
we grew up. Now,
Mhm,
as you moved ahead and were becoming a teenager,
mhm.
talk about that period of your life. Did
Oh
you?
wow. Okay, that was fun. That was fun. Uh, uh, there was no high school. The voice was starting to change. And so I was a little embarrassed at first to sing, and I really didn't get into singing with any bands or any groups or anything like that. We would be on the street corners doing what is called crooning, just crooning. We used to call it, Ed Mel Williams, he's a crooner. This guy was a crooner. We were calling each other's crooners instead of singers. And what we would do, we'd sing and we'd harmonize and we'd stand on the street corner. And this is a true story, right there in Richmond Heights, Florida. All of the cats we'd all get around my right in front of my mom's house. There was a street light, and that's where we would all sing and croon and tell long stories and lies and stories and things like fight and just be teenage boys. Right now, there was a young lady by the name, and I have to call her name out as well. Her name is Vicky Bethel, who was also a wonderful singer. And she and I would sit on my mom's porch, and we would just play the records, and we would sing and sing and sing. And uh, I was always hoping that maybe we would start a group together. But as our life, she went a different way and I went a different way. And then I started junior college, uh, right there in Miami-Dade Junior College. And right there is when we got together there was a group of guys. One of them was Collie Coates and another fellow by the name of Lanny Sumter, and then there was a fellow by the name of Jesse Jones. We put a group together. They put a group together by the name of the Hot Buttered Soul. This was right after high school. We got together and put a band together called the Hot Butter Soul Band. We were competing with groups called, and you'll hear about him. His name was the Prolifics and the Ocean Liners and all of those famous groups that were doing a lot of the Step Hall and the Uniques and so many different groups right there in South Florida. I was a part of a group that was called the Hot Buttered Soul. And we would play little local venues all over the place. And that's how I started singing live with live bands and things like that.
Was that name inspired by Isaac Hayes' album?
Yes, yes, it was. In fact, one of the songs that we would do, we did songs by the Dells. You remember the Dells? And we would do "Oh What a Night." Lanny Sumter was always the lead singer. Jesse Jones was one of the lead singers. I was always just the background singer and the guy who did all of the dancing, but I was skinny and they used to call me Squirrel as a kid. And I was all over the place dancing and acting up, but I could do a whole lot of harmony. And so that's how the band just Lanny winded up going away and finished his college career, and he winded up owning 3 or 4 or 5 different McDonald's up in the Lakeland area. So he did very well for himself.
That's a wise career change there.
Yes. Collie Coates, he's still down there in South Florida doing his thing. He's a great artist. He paints. We're all retired now, but he paints. He's a great artist. Jesse Jones, we all went our different ways. One of the drummers, his name was Cleve Morrow. He passed away. We had horns. I can't remember all of the names. We had horns. We had keyboards. We had bass player, and we had a lot of fun. Doing a lot of the venues down in South Florida. A little quick, if you don't mind me saying, a little quick story. We were down south in Homestead doing a show one night. And down in Homestead at a place called King's Stable or King's something. And we were getting our equipment I was getting the equipment out of the trunk of Lanny's car, the speaker. And as I got Lanny always kept a shotgun. True story. He always kept a shotgun in the trunk of the car. As I'm lifting up the speaker to help get the speaker out of the trunk of the car one night, the shotgun was loaded. The shotgun dropped down from the speaker because it was on the speaker. It dropped down and discharged in the trunk of his car and went straight through the, the middle of my leg. Thank goodness it was in the knee area, and it passed through the car into another car, and there was buckshots all over the next car. True story. They thought I was shot. I
Wow.
fell. The speaker fell, and I fell, but I wasn't shot. I wanted to check to see if I was hit, but I wasn't hit. True story. Oh
Yeah.
my God. Oh,
Did the police come at all when that happened?
no, no, because there was no damage to. There was just a little small hole, in Lanny's car, but in the other car, uh, it was buckshot, and that was pretty much it. No one was hurt, no one was injured. We went ahead and loaded up the equipment and did the show, and left. A couple of nights later, about a week or so later, we did another show. Coming home one night, real late, about 1 o'clock, and on the way home, we got pulled over by the police. Lanny had his license. Everyone had his license, their license and everything. But me, I had a bench warrant of a ticket that I hadn't paid. It was a stupid ticket from the car that I didn't have a light on or whatever, and I got a ticket and didn't pay the ticket. So that night, about 1 o'clock, 1:30, 2 o'clock, I went to jail. The first and only time I ever was behind the bars, the full jail cell, and I had to call. They called my mother, and she had to come bail me out. Bail me out. My mother says, "No more, no more music for you. That's it. That's
Oh,
it."
wow.
True story.
How long did that last for?
After a while, the band disbanded.
Yeah.
We were doing a show somewhere, and we left our equipment that night. And the next morning, the next night or so, all of our equipment was stolen. So the band kind of disbanded. We went our separate ways. I had a very close friend. His name was Rodney Randolph. There was two guys. One was Rodney Randolph in Richmond Heights, and then his brother was Robert Randolph in Richmond Heights. We lived right there on Lincoln Boulevard. Their dad was my mom's insurance agent. His name was Mr. Randolph, and but anyway, Rodney went to work for a place called TK Productions in Hialeah. It was a place called TK Productions right there off of Hialeah, right off 54th Street. And you keep going east, you're going to get into Hialeah. And where he worked in the distribution area. I didn't think anything about it. That was his job. He worked there. He worked there for quite a few years, and then he winded up leaving to go to DC he was a officer, a security officer, Capitol Police officer. The story about Rodney is he had a friend. He knew all of the people at TK Productions, TK Distributors. One of the kids that was at TK Productions was a fellow by the name of Harry Casey. His name was Harry Casey. Harry and together. And Rodney said, "Man, there's this guy. He's a white kid, a little skinny white kid." He said, "There's this guy. He's putting a band together, and he needs some singers to help him do his show, put his band together." I said, "I'll see what he's got. I'll go and see what he's got." And so I went to his mom's, met him, went to his mom's house, and we would rehearse in his mom's garage right there in Hialeah, Miami Lakes. And him and a couple of bass players and guitar players and things like that. And they did all this crazy music that I some of it was okay, but some of it he had his own ideas, and I wasn't into doing his own people with their own ideas. I was doing stuff that I knew. So I sang with him a couple of times, and we played with I played with him a couple of times. I said, no, I'm not feeling this guy. I'm not feeling this group. So I kind of went on and left them and got married and started a life. Started a life with bought a home and all that kind of stuff. About 3 or 4 years later, the next thing I hear is this group called KC and the Sunshine Band. All of the cats that I was working with, that was them. I said, what the heck? What the heck? They became one of the biggest sounds. They defined South Florida. And I kind of let them go. I said, no, I'm not feeling this group. And there was KC and the Sunshine. They became KC and the Sunshine Band. I knew all of the guys. A little background story about my music history. I stopped doing music altogether and got involved in the church. Got into the church, a place called Glendale Baptist Church, right there in Richmond Heights. And there was a preacher there, a young preacher there. His name was Rufus Grant. And he knew that I was a singer. And he said, why don't you get in the male choir? And so sure enough, I went ahead and got in the male choir with the at Glendale Missionary Baptist Church. The pastor there was Reverend Joe Coates, and a very, very, very progressive church. And I got to singing in the choir and singing in the choir, and the next thing I know, I'm all grouped off with a little group of singers. We ended up having us a little group called we called ourselves Prophecy. So we had a little group called Prophecy, and the Prophecy consisted of the keyboard, but the piano player. His name was Sam Wilson, and then we had Zena Coates at the time. She winded up marrying Sam Wilson, and then there was two twin girls. One was Tangela King and Mingo, Angela and Tangela Mingo, and I was the male singer. And there was a bass player by the name of Rob Lampkin, and his at the time his wife Audrey Lampkin. So we started singing in the church and doing all of the contemporary gospel music songs, and people just loved it. And that's what, that's my church story. And
Right.
then I started going out on my own, doing some gospel music in different venues, different churches. People was asking for us to come and sing, and I would go and sing different churches and different venues all over South Florida. And the next thing I know, I'm doing concerts. I'm doing concerts.
Now, were these at larger venues, or were they relatively the
These
same
were
size?
churches. Different churches. What's interesting, the word got out about Prophecy and Melvin Williams and Mel. I wasn't Mel Williams. I was Melvin Williams at the time, and sure enough, people were asking for us to sing different places, and I got a phone call from a gentleman asking me to bring my band to a place called Studio 183. And that's at the time it was still Carroll City. I was asked to bring my band and different other acts and do a show or do a act at Studio 183. It holds about 1,000, maybe 1,500 people, and they asked me to do open for Shirley Caesar, the gospel great Shirley Caesar. So it was on Mother's Day. The gentleman who asked me to do that show, his name was Ricky D. Ray. He was one of the promoters, gospel promoters at the time. Sure enough, Ricky and I winded up being friends, and I winded up doing the show with opening for Shirley Caesar on Mother's Day. The place was packed. Half of my church winded up coming up there, and all of the churches piled in. And the next thing I know, I'm somebody. Wow, and I guess I got the big head. I guess that's what's happened, because then I started doing other things. Folks were asking me about doing singing solos. I started singing solos, different places, different venues, different places. And one thing led to the next. I winded up being an MC for a group called, a very famous group, the Mighty Clouds of Joy. That's how I winded up going into different venues, different venues, and so forth and so on. I winded up getting a phone call I got a phone call from a fellow by the name of Barry Ivan White. His name was Barry Ivan White, who had connections with promoters and producers worldwide. Somehow, some way, I was recruited to fill in. My life had kind of, instead of work, I was working, but I lost a job, and I was kind of doing from job to job, different types of jobs, but I wasn't making the money that I used to make. And my first marriage kind of fell apart after, and I had a wonderful wife, beautiful children, and I'll talk about them, but wonderful wife, beautiful children, but my life started unraveling. My personal life started unraveling. I started drinking. I wasn't ever a drinker. I started drinking, and with depression and all that kind of stuff. So everything just kind of unraveled for me. However, Barry said, Mel, I've got an offer for you. There's a promoter in Europe, in Grand Canary Islands. They've got the Platter review there. Would you be interested in going over there and being a member of that Platter group over in Europe? I said, man, I got nothing else going in my life here. I might as well go ahead and do something. So the next thing I know, I was on a plane to Madrid, Spain, and I spent 6 months over there. Some of the people, Patty Joe, who was a part of Bubbling Brown Sugar. There's a gentleman by the name of Jesse Ferguson, we call him Papa Jesse, who actually was a fill-in for the Platters, and he groomed me, and he trained me how to make the steps and the harmonies and the songs for the Platters. So I ended up over in a place called Grand Canary Islands, and I spent 6 months over there. You had fellas like, you had Mel Dancy right there in the middle, who actually was a part of the Platters at one point, right there in the middle. To your right is with me. To your left, I had hair at the time. We had over here Chuck Roll, and I talked to you earlier about Bobby Springer. He's right there out front, right there. He's gone now. And then we had a gentleman in the back of Papa Jesse, and it was either Papa Jesse all the way in the back, right there, and it was either Papa Jesse or it was a gentleman by the name of Mel Dancy, who actually were part of the Platters. You know, the Platters is a group of 1,000 voices. Those were part of the 1,000 voices that they talked about. I had the pleasure and the privilege of being a part of the Platters over in Europe for about 6 months. We came back home. Well, I came back home, and then tried to start a life over again after Spain.
So Mel, getting the opportunity to go to Spain, I mean, first and foremost, I'm sure that was a unbelievable experience.
It was.
But also to perform under the name of the Platters, right, with an original member of the Platters.
Yes.
That had to have been an experience that one could never forget, because you think back in your early days, right? I imagine groups like the Platters and other groups of that era were influences on you and your family.
Speaking of those influences, I'm going to go back. I regress back into. I'll go back to. I'll say 1955, 1956, 57, 56, 57. My dad, my father, would sing. He would sing the songs of the groups called the Ink Spots. He would sing the songs of the Ink Spots. And then there was this group called the Platters. Now, I'm a little fellow now. Watch what I'm getting ready to tell you. I'm a little fellow. But I was so impressed with what I saw. I saw people who were refined and defined, and they had their steps and their harmonies. And I was amazed. I was fascinated. And my daddy sounded like them. And my daddy, I saw them on TV, and I said, I want to be like that. And there was another gentleman who was one of my influences, and I sat and watched it. It was only on for a little while. There was a fellow by the name of Nat King Cole. Nat King Cole had a show on TV. A lot of folks don't know about that or don't remember it. But I remember it. I sat and watched it on TV myself. I want to say about 1956, 57. It was called the Nat King Cole Show. And I sat and I watched it. And I said, oh my goodness, I want to be like him. I want to do what he's doing. And lo and behold, as an adult, and I'll tell you a little story a little later on, I had the pleasure, I never met Natalie personally, but I did meet his other daughters who lived in Boca Raton, Florida. And they would come and hang out with one of the groups that I used to sing with right there in Boca Raton at a place called the Addison, one of the premier spots in Boca. And my group would sing there. And one of Nat King Cole's daughters, she's gone now, but she would come and sit and listen to us do our thing. So yes, I've had some inspiration. The Platters. I said, oh my God, and I was amazed that one day I would be a part of representing the Platters.
What a cool connection, though, that
Oh my
story.
goodness.
Kind of growing up as a little boy and
Yes,
watching Nat King Cole and then getting a chance
winding
all
up.
those years later.
There it is. There's the connection, man. It's
Right.
connecting the dots of Mel
Yeah.
Williams. Huh?
Yeah, exactly. Now you mentioned performing in Boca, which is a bit of a drive from down in, Miami. So how did you start getting booked at places a little bit further north, maybe like Broward or Palm
Mhm.
Beach and that sort of thing?
Well, there was a gentleman by the name of E. Well, I was singing songs with that gentleman, Bobby Stringer. We put together a platter tribute. It consisted of Mel Dancy. It consisted of a young lady by the name of Betty Pageant, who's doing very well right here, right now in South Florida. And there was a gentleman by the name who actually played for the Drifters by the name, he was a bass player, but his name was Frankie Say, Frankie Say, and other different other singers, but it was Frankie Say, Bobby Stringer, Betty Pageant, Mel Williams, and then there was the gentleman by the name of E.J. Brown. We went all throughout South Florida singing as the tribute to the Platters. There was I think I might even send a picture, showed you a picture of those guys. And as we sang, I've got another, EJ was also a part of a group called the Sensations. The Sensations were looking for one more vocalist. The Sensations out of South Florida consisted of Ron Jonas and Frank Wilson, who's gone, E.J. Brown, who's gone. We had a fellow by the name of David Bellamy and another fellow by the name of Rob Cox. There was five of us, and we were all over South Florida as a group called the Sensations. This is where I winded up playing in Boca often. Often. In fact, it was a house gig. We were there every Friday night. We would have the place packed every Friday night, and then Tuesday nights we would be there. We moved from there. We went to a place called the Pavilion in South Florida, in Boca, and we played there. And Pavilion is doing very well. They have all of the acts all over the place. Yeah, that's my guys. They're the Sensations. We did all of the the 55 plus places. There's my man Frank Wilson, who's gone, Rob Cox, and then E.J. Brown is gone, and then I've got Ron Jonas, and there's me on the end, the Sensations. We played all of the venues, all of the 55 plus, all of the venues in South Florida that booked acts.
Talk
And,
about some of the outfits because it's not one of those types of events where you get up in some jeans and a t-shirt. So,
oh no, no, these were sit down theaters. Now, these were sit down theaters. People would come to see us play. Places like Century Villages, all of the Century Villages. We would do all of the shows in Century Villages and Kings Points. These are 55 plus communities where they had an auditorium where people, a theater where people would come and watch us perform, and we would do a show. And then, of course, we did the clubs, did the supper clubs as well. So no, this was not jeans. People came to enjoy Motown music. We did a lot of Motown and up tempo top 40 things.
how much did you have the say in deciding what songs you may have performed and which ones that you may not have wanted to?
I got in where I could fit in. Basically, I was a great harmony guy. I could find harmony, and I was great in doing the harmonies. I always was a part of doing all of the harmonies and the choreography. Every now and then, they would have me lead a song. I would sing two or three different, if we had a set of 20 songs, I would do maybe three or four of the songs as far as a lead singer. But the most things that I would do was the harmonies. I was the background, I was the backbone of the harmonies. Even with the Platters, I was more into the harmonies and the choreography than all of the lead singing. After a while, though, I said, "Wait a minute, I can do this. I can do those." And so I winded up starting leading the songs and doing my own shows as a lead singer. Oh my goodness! Oh, that takes me back. I'm looking at Bobby Stringer. I'm looking at Mel Dancy in the middle, and I look at the lovely and talented. Now Mel Dancy's gone. Mel Dancy was a phenomenal entertainer, a phenomenal singer and keyboard player. He was a part of the Platters. He actually sang with the Platters as one of their voices. And Betty Paget, who's doing very well right now. She's hanging out, she's doing things locally with a group called the Bobby Nathan Band right now in South Florida. And up top is myself, and then to your far left or to your far right, stage right, is Frankie Say, who actually played and sang with the Drifters. And the Platters tribute did very well in South Florida. I want to say in the mid 90s, all the way through, I want to say the mid 2000s, the mid 2000s.
Now, Betty Paget had a bit of a resurgence also too. Some of her early stuff has been reissued, uh, which has, I think, helped to kind of get more people aware of
Yes.
some of her musical career and all that.
Oh, yes.
Did you ever get a chance to see her perform?
Oh, yes. I get a chance to see him perform every now and then, but when she's performing somewhere, I'm performing somewhere, which we'll talk about. I'm a part of a touring group right now, and we'll talk about it in a little bit. But Betty Paget is with a band, and she does things on her own. But she's with a group called the Bobby Nathan Band, and they tour all of South Florida, all of the blues spots, and all of the blues joints, and all of the spots, all the venues. She does very well. Bobby Nathan, I know all of the guys. They're very good entertainers, very friendly. But Betty Paget, I love her. I want to say love you, Betty Paget, and thank you for being a part of my life and me being a part of your life. Uh, she has another singer by the name with her, Dottie Kelly, who's also a wonderful singer and entertainer. I can give you names, man. I can go on. I want to give a shout out to Nicole Henry, who's a phenomenal entertainer. She's nationwide, worldwide. Nicole Henry. She's was actually she won best vocalist back in 2010. I've got all of her. I've got two or three of her CDs. She won hip hop, but not hip hop, but jazz. She was the jazz finalist and winner for Soul Train Awards. So a shout out to Nicole Henry, who's doing very well. Follow her, find out where she's going to be, and if she's in your area, get to see her. All righty, got a little shout out to
Yeah.
people I care about. Yes.
But to your point, Mel, there's so many people who
Oh,
have played a part in the journey and who are still active and
Very much
performing,
so.
which is fantastic. You mentioned jazz. I know one of my personal favorite jazz musicians from South Florida is Leo Casino, who sadly
Oh,
passed away
yes,
uh, a couple years ago. Did you get a
yes.
chance to ever work with him?
I got a chance to do something, a walk on with him a few times. He always had his shows somewhere. I was always having my shows somewhere. Leo was a very, very lovely entertainer and singer. And I guess you know about his story. His story, he was found and he was abandoned as a child, and he was found and cared for and brought up to be the gentleman that he is. But he became a great singer, great entertainer, and he played all of the venues I played. But he was always at some place when I was playing somewhere. He was somewhere else, so I didn't get a chance to work with him on a regular basis. Jesse Jones, another great jazz player. I speak hats off to Jesse Jones, who is a brother. Jesse Jones was a bailiff for many, many years with the court court system in South Florida. And he said, one of these days I'm going to be free to be able to do his thing. And sure enough, he's retired and he's touring he's been to Russia, been many places. He plays locally, Jesse. And then his brother was Melton Mustafa. They're doing a show right now. The Melton Mustafa Orchestra. They're doing something this weekend. 28 years in the working right now as we speak. February the 24th through I think, 28th, the Melton Mustafa uh, uh, band and tribute is occurring right here in South Florida in Overtown right now. Great artists. You have Dr. Ed Kaye, uh, awesome artist. One of my nephews, who's a great entertainer. His name is Alvin Jackson. He goes by the name of A Stone. He's performing with this great organization this next week. So just a little hats off and a shout out to the Mustafa Melton and Melton Mustafa Orchestra. They're doing their thing next week.
So it's very active. Still, there's a lot going on, right? I know
Yes, sir. A
from
lot going on.
our conversations as well, you are pretty busy. I mean, you're still doing a lot of traveling. And what's that like for you? Just as you kind of get older, what's that experience like for you?
Oh, Jeff, I got to tell you, man, I travel more than I could imagine. Uh, we just did a tour a couple of months ago. We did a 10-city tour of Texas, with Irving, Texas, uh, Austin, Texas, Houston, Texas. And these are in theaters, venues that hold 2,000 people, packed houses. We're with an organization called Moxie Productions. And we bring the group that I'm with is a uh, group called the Motowners. The Motowners was founded right here in South Florida by a gentleman by the name of Derek Hadley. Derek Hadley actually he kind of took what I was doing. When I was busy and couldn't fill in for the sensations, I would ask Derek Hadley to come fill in for me with the sensations. And Derek Hadley said, "Wait a minute, I can do something with this." Derek put together an act, and he started what was called the Motowners. The Motowners consist of good friends. There was a fellow by the name Theo Marshall, and there's a gentleman by the name, actually named Duke Ellington. His name is Duke Ellington. His name is Duke Ellington Bryce, but he goes by Duke Ellington, who was a DJ, a local DJ. We have different female vocalists. Chantel Baker, who's a great entertainer, sings with us, and we alternate with different gentlemen. There's a gentleman by the name of Jared Marshall who sings, and different guys. But Derek put together what is called the Motowners. We toured 10 cities in Texas a couple of months ago. We just got back from Alabama at the historic Troy Theater, in Alabama, in Montgomery, Alabama, last weekend. 2 weeks before that, we did a 5-day tour, a 5-day stint over in St. Martin at a place called Anguilla, and nice venue there. We had a wonderful time there, and so he's got probably booked 70, 80, 90, 100 dates between now and the end of the year. So I stay pretty busy. I'm on a plane next week, not next week, but the March 6th or 7th, somewhere in that neighborhood. We'll be in Atlanta at a theater in Atlanta. On the 8th, that Saturday, we'll be in Jacksonville at a theater in Jacksonville. So we're very busy, Jeff.
Yeah.
Very busy.
Do you feel like because a lot of the songs you're performing are classic Motown songs, are families bringing younger kids and teenagers to those kinds of shows who are now discovering that great music of the past?
Derek was Derek Hadley put it this way. We used to do shows, do places, songs and places, nightclubs. We start at 10 o'clock. And then we're doing top 40 songs. And we would end the night, different, him and me in different places. We'd end the show at 1 o'clock, not get home until 1:30, 2 o'clock. What he put together was shows that was 90-minute shows. We'd start at 8 o'clock. We'd end at 9:30, 10 o'clock, be out of there. Our audience, our core audience are seniors, 40, 50, 60, 70. I see people coming in, walkers. Folks are coming in, and every now and then you see some young folks coming in. But our audience in all of these venues are seniors and 40, 50 plus. And we're finished by 9:30. We're finished by 10 o'clock.
Right.
So there we are.
Yeah.
Full band. There's a full band, a great band. I got to give a shout out to our band members, and give a shout out to those guys. They're consistent. They keep the, and our vocalists. We have 3 female vocalists, as I said. I can't always remember all of their names, but there's 3 different female vocalists that come and sing with us, and that we have 5 guys. So we do a show, and we do the Motown. We do some Four Tops. We do Temptations, Martha and the Vandellas, those guys like that. We would do the OJs, we would do the Spinners, things like that. And this is what our audience want to hear.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're playing the hits.
Yeah, we'll throw a Kool and the Gang in there on them every now and then. We'll throw some Stevie Wonder in there on them.
You have a full horn section as well when you get into some Kool and the Gang?
We wouldn't have a whole horn section. We'd have one horn. We'd have a sax player, or we'd have a trumpet player.
Okay.
Bass player, Robert Carter is our bass. He reminds you of James Jamerson of the Funk Brothers. the same kind of, he was our musical director, and he would throw down keep the rhythm, keep the bass lines going for we have a, 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 a guitar player by the name Bobby, who's a great guitar player. We have a drummer who's Al. We have a drummer by the name of Al, and sometimes we have a different drummer. We have a keyboard player, player. His name is Moses. We call him Moses. He has a powerful name. Moses is sometimes with us. Sometimes he's not able to be with us because he's also with a group called the Old School Gang. The Old School Gang is the guys I used to play with. I'd be with every now and then. It consisted of a fellow by the name of Paul Lewis and different guys, and Derek Gale. Paul Lewis was a member of the KC and the Sunshine Band. You can see him. He started playing when he was 17 years old. He toured the whole world with KC as a horn player. He's with a group right now called the KC and the Sunshine Band. The Old School Gang. But he used to play many years ago with KC when KC was hot and performing in arenas all around the world.
Were you surprised at all by that mainstream and ultimate worldwide commercial success that KC and the Sunshine Band had?
It seemed like the world was hungry for that sound. It came around the same time as the disco, the Bee Gees and Saturday Night Fever,
like the Tramps and that type.
Exactly. And I got to tell you, Jeff, speaking of Casey and his guys, I'm friends with the guy that sang "Woman, take me in your arm and rock me, baby."
George McCrae.
George McCrae. I'm friends with him. I might have even had a picture of him. I might have even sent a picture of him, of us together hanging out.
His wife just passed through his, I don't know if they were still married, but his
no, yeah, they're not married.
Yeah, Gwen McCrae just died.
Gwen, actually, I'm friends with all of the guys. You got a group of, speaking of Derek Mack, one of the baddest guys out here in South Florida. I've had a chance, the pleasure to work with Derek Mack, the Derek Mack Band. Had the pleasure to work with his brother, who is Troy McCrae. Those McCraes are very, very well known, very well respected here in the music industry here in South Florida. And yes, Derek Mack, who's the brother is Troy McCrae. And then there's Gwen McCrae was married to George McCrae. And George McCrae, I get a chance to sit and have drinks with him every now and then. A very, very humble fella, very nice guy. Hats off to George. Hats off to Derek Mack. Hats off to Troy McCrae. Just want to say hello, guys. Yeah, man.
Did you get a chance to see some of these contemporaries back in their, whether it be the 70s or 80s?
Back then, I was pretty much in the church. So I kind of stayed away from all of the, how can I put it, the secular music at that time. And I pretty much focused on gospel music. Speaking of, I did a record. I actually recorded with which is that story I wanted to tell you. That recording, I did a record called Let There Be Peace, and I did a record called Perfect Love. That record was recorded right at in a studio. one of the guys, Bob Smith, was the guitar player and the producer. The uh, bass player was a fellow by the name of Bobby Pruitt. The keyboard player, and I wanted to mention, was one of the Baker brothers. There was two well-known brothers by the name of Derek and Sean Baker. They're one of them is on this record. What's interesting about this record and my mentioning the Baker brothers, that Baker was on an airplane traveling, I think it was right around Mother's Day, was traveling back from South Florida at the time it was called Air Florida, was traveling back to Atlanta. He was the keyboard player for Shirley Caesar. And he was on that plane that ended up crashing in the Everglades.
Oh, wow. The Value Jet?
That was the name of it, Value Jet?
Yeah.
That was the name of it. Crashed in the Everglades.
Oh, wow.
He was on that plane.
That's tragic.
Yeah. But he was on my record. He was on my record, Yeah.
Yeah. What a tragic story. I mean, just hearing, well, his passing, but also at the same time, a very positive, because you did get a chance to put out that
Yes.
record. And was that the first time that any music that you had written and performed on was released in a physical format like vinyl?
Yes, it was, and I was green at all of that. What I was a singer, but I knew I had music in me. I still got about 10, 15 inspirational songs, and which the story is still being written, Jeff. The story is still being written, because before I say goodbye, I want to make sure that this project is complete. I owe this. This was inspired within me, and I gotta get it out. The secular songs and the, what can I say, the cover songs, I can do that. But I've got a CD in the works right now, and I sent you some of the songs of it, and it's called "You've Got Mail." It's kind of an AOL take on "You've Got Mail." Well, it's "You've Got Mail," MEL, and I've got about 20 songs there, but I've got about 13, 14 inspirational songs that I've got to finish. And that's my project. And it won't be too long. It might be sooner than later.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic to hear. And also, when you announced the name of the album, I kind of got these voiceover vibes. Like, you should have been doing something in your life where you were doing some kind of voiceover for something. Did anyone ever mention that to you in all your life? Because your voice is very distinct for something like that.
Oh, that's so funny that you would mention this. Many years ago, I was in the corporate world. I lived in, I worked in the corporate offices, and I was on the phone with actually, I was in finance. I was in collections and things like that. And when I would call the people, the very thing that they would ask, are you an entertainer? Are you on the radio? Are you a radio announcer? Are you an announcer? I said, no, I'm not. And I got, it was so funny. No matter where I worked, no matter what I did, the folks would ask if I was a radio announcer. And sure enough, there was a radio station down in Miami. It used to be called WMBM. Way back. I want to say in the 70s, the early 70s. And I want to say around the mid 80s, early 80s, I was down there doing something. I was putting together a promo for a concert that I was going to do, and the owners asked me would I consider doing radio. And I said, nah, no, I'm a singer. I don't want it. But I had the opportunity back then to do that.
I think that is it makes perfect sense
Yeah.
because your voice definitely would have been
Wow.
perfect for
Well,
radio.
the story's still being written, man.
Yeah,
The story is still being written.
it certainly is. And just thinking about radio too, WEDR was another station I think that
Oh,
also.
yes.
What are your memories of listening to WEDR? Because that station, it still exists, right? But it has transformed quite a
It's
bit.
changed names. Actually, I'm very good friends with there was a fellow by the name of Jerry Russian, Super Jerry J, very good friend of mine. Actually, he would we would shoot pool together right there, Studio 183, right there in Miami Gardens. At the time it was Carroll City, but now Miami Gardens. He would shoot Studio 183, and we would go and shoot pool together. Uh, Jerry Russian. There was another fellow by the name of another fellow by the name of Chico the Virgo. All of these guys are good friends of mine who I still know, and we don't talk to each other on a regular basis, but we say hello to each other every now and then. Right now, he'll go if I go down South Florida and hang out a little bit. There's a place called the uh, VFW on Pembroke's Pines, 8195. 8195. Those guys hang out there. All of the vets. Hello to my buddies and my vets there at Studio One at VFW 8195 on Pembroke. All of my guys, you got Captain and you got all of my friends there. Jerry would hang out there and uh, uh, we'd sit and drink and and smoke cigars and smoke our pipes and talk about the good old days.
Did you feel like a lot of events and shows were happening at places like that, like VFW halls or different types of places like that that maybe weren't essentially like a concert venue, but they would put on a lot of local acts? Do you have any memories of those types of places?
Well, the VFW right now puts on an act every, I want to say, at least once a month. And I've got a nephew, his name is A Stone, and he plays there once a month. And there's a nice crowd there. I don't do those kind of places. I love it. I go and hang out there. But what we do is we're full production with venues of 1,500 people or more, and what I do. However, there are smaller venues. Back in the day, they used to have guys. They would have groups. A fellow by the name of David Hudson would play there. David Hudson played there, and there's a place called Three Fingers back in the day. Little spots that would house maybe 100 people, 150 people, and they would play in places like that. Back in the day, there was also a place called Elks Lodge in Fort Lauderdale, where they would have shows in there, and Chico Wesley, Chico the Virgo, would be the host. A little shout out to Chico the Virgo of back in the day, Hot 105, and uh, uh, there was the gentleman by the name of Rodney Baltimore, who was a very well-known DJ and promoter there. I want to give another shout out to Rodney Baltimore and guys like that of Hot 105 and their different venue, different venues. They would play different venues. Uh-huh.
Yeah. It's always fun to spotlight some of those places that may not always be known by most people. And
Yes.
I know another venue that kind of became more prominent in the mid 80s in Miami was the Cameo Theater. Did you ever get a chance to see anything there or perform at the Cameo?
No, I did not. As I said, back in the day, I spent most of my time in not secular venues, but more. I would go to different churches and more Christian venues is where I would do a lot of things. But I knew a lot of folks. And
Right.
later, later on, when my life changed,
Sure.
a lot of those spots I would hang out at.
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, that's
Tucker's Lounge, Tucker's on 27th Avenue. There was a little spot. In fact, there was a spot we were talking about where Clarence Carter. I played. There was a place called the Roman Pub, right there in Miami Gardens. There was also a place called Mahogany Grill, who was owned by the baseball player who was with the Marlins, who got a who was with the Marlins.
and that's one thing too, I imagine, in the length of time that you've been dedicated to your craft, that you've seen a lot of places come and go,
Yes,
and unfortunately a lot of places that may have been there in the early days or even later are now long gone,
long gone.
memories of the past. Is there a certain place in your heart, whether it be a church or a more secular venue to play, is there one in particular that really stands out to you as one of the most special places you had a chance to perform at?
That's a good quote. That's a good thought. Uh, One of the most dearest places that I had an opportunity to participate. At the time, we didn't call ourselves performing, but we called ourselves rendering service with Glendale Baptist Church. There, my pastor was Reverend Joe Coates, long gone, but there, my heart and my soul was there. My children were raised there. Um, my children were raised there. Wonderful family was raised there. They were brought up in that church. So yeah, I get a little emotional. I'm sorry, but I get a little emotional when I think
Oh
about
no, totally fine.
Glendale and the beauty of my family and the children there. Speaking, I got to say, the first kid, I lost. We lost the child in childbirth. It didn't make it, uh, and it broke my heart. Our first kid, little girl, and so what happened was the doctor told my wife at the time. He says, "Well, it might not be healthy for you to have a child. You might not want to consider conceiving." So I said, "Okay." Next thing up, we went ahead and we adopted a son. Our first child, his name Anthony. We adopted a son. He was 1 month old when we adopted him. His name was Anthony. And the thing about it is, when he was 1 month old, my wife became pregnant. So the next kid comes along. He was born, thank God. His name was Michael. Michael and Tony are only 11 months apart. Sure enough, here comes Angela. Here comes Angela, my daughter. And then finally, my son, Greg. So I winded up with 4 kids. We weren't supposed to have any. We were supposed to have one adopted kid. We ended up with 4 lovely kids, and they're all well. We lost my son Michael. He was yeah. As an adult, he was suffering from schizophrenia, and we lost him about 10 years ago. Anthony is doing very well. My son, Greg, he's doing extremely well. He's in Atlanta. He's doing very well. He just got married. Angela, I consider her my legacy. Angela is Dr. Angela Williams Claremont. She's teaching science. She teaches chemistry. So I'm blessed, and I just want to let you know. I get a little emotional. I would talk about things. Yeah. So
Yeah, no, I appreciate you taking us through that and not
yeah.
realizing the question about your one of the places that meant a lot to you would yield such a deep and confessional story. So I really appreciate you sharing the history and the connection to your family. Uh, it's just really a very touching story, Mel. I appreciate you sharing that. Now, Mel, I know you had mentioned earlier when we first started our episode here, and then you also touched on it again a little bit ago about that show at the Roman pub
Yeah.
with the Soul Providers.
Oh,
And I want to get into more about your time with that group because I feel like when you look on YouTube, you can see some video clips of you with that band.
yeah.
And that group. So talk about a little bit more about the Soul Providers and
Oh,
for even people who may not be as familiar.
oh yeah. I can. I have fond memories. The sober about it, a lot of fun. Uh, in fact, how it started. The first gig that I ever did with those guys, I was late. We were playing in the city of Hollywood at the Hollywood Band. At the time, it was called the Hollywood Band Shell. And I had to get there. They were already on stage. They were already playing. And I ran. They had a place for me to park. I ran on stage to jump on stage as the first note to sing. And true story. Charlie Tona had all kind of connections. He was friends with Bo Diddley. He was friends with Bo Diddley. Uh, we would sit and open. We would go and open for Bo Diddley at some of the shows that Bo Diddley, the architect of rock and one of the architects of rock and roll,
Right.
we would be right there opening for Bo Diddley.
What's
We
that like? I mean, just being in the presence
Oh,
of
it
such a
was like
legend
this.
like that.
I would do this to Bo. Man, I'm not worthy. I'm never. Charlie Tona has some of Bo Diddley's guitars. Bo Diddley lived in Gainesville. He lived in Gainesville and a very friendly, humble gentleman. And we lost, of course, he lost him, but he was very friendly. He would allow me to just sit and just talk with him. And I would ask him, just like you were asking me questions, I would ask him, man, tell me about it. How was it like? He said, man, it ain't easy out there in the streets. The streets ain't easy. But it's a lot of fun. And that's Bo. We opened the Soul Providers. We opened for the Righteous Brothers. Uh, we actually opened for one of the keyboard players was Carl Spagnola, who actually played with Jay and the Americans. So I have a shout out with him. And then the bass player was Bob Smith. Carl, I can't remember the last name, but Carl, we lost him, our drummer. We had horn players. We had three or four-piece horns, and another one of the keyboard players was a guy by the name of I can't think of his name. It'll come to me. But he winded up playing for Casey and the Sunshine Band. Later on, he played for Casey and the Sunshine Band. So all of these guys, we opened for little Peggy Marsh. We played for Dion. Dion, who was living in South Florida in the Boca area, we opened for him. So had a lot of ins and outs with the Soul Provider. They had a lot of fun with him.
Yeah, you did. Was there ever any talk about ever recording anything like in a studio?
No, we didn't. We were pretty much just a show band. And after a while, I kind of moved on with the sensations. EJ Brown had moved on. Actually, we lost EJ. We lost EJ Brown. EJ was instrumental in getting me hooked up with the sensations. We lost Bobby Springer. Bobby Springer was instrumental with me getting hooked up with a soul provider. So we lost those guys. Interesting enough, at Bobby Springer's funeral, all of the entertainers from South Florida converged at his house, and we had a get together that night, and then the next day we funeralized him, and every entertainer from famous to not so famous were right there in at the church of that funeral. It was more like a concert than a funeral.
Wow. I imagine there were a lot of people who were there that maybe you haven't even seen in years.
Oh, there were people who I hadn't seen in years. When I walked in, the preacher says, and I went upstairs and says, look like we've got Mel Williams is in the house." And so it's one of those things. I'm like, gee, this is a funeral, and everybody's being announced. Wow.
Yeah.
David Hudson, Mel Dancy, many artists, local artists, Betty Paget, many artists were there, local artists.
Did you know other musicians and singers of that, of even going back a little further, like Betty Wright? Did you get a chance to work with her or know her at all?
I knew Betty. I didn't. I never interacted with Betty personally, but I did get to go to her house a couple of times because at the time there was Leo Williams who was with he had a thing going in the Bahamas, and I was friends with him. And I guess they were married at one time or whatever, but I was friends with Leo Williams way back in the day, right there on 38th Street, right there, and where she started out at. So I knew where she lived. I know many friends who interacted directly with Betty Wright. In fact, there's a buddy of mine right to this day who's doing extremely well. He goes by the name of Larry Dog. He's called Larry Dog, but his real name is Larry Gordon. He's a comedian. He does very well. He's been on BET and different things. His name is a little shout out to Larry Gordon. He goes by the name of Larry Dog, the Larry Dog Band, and he's all over South Florida, and he does many different venues, a lot of places. A little shout out to him, but he was very close to Betty Wright, and Larry is very close to me. Mm-hmm.
Another name that has worked closely with like Betty Wright, for example, who has come up on the podcast before, legendary South Florida personality, songwriter Clarence Reed, who of course later went by Blowfly.
Yeah,
Sometimes
Clarence,
both.
Clarence Reed, true story. I remarried and lived in Miami Gardens, formerly known as Carroll City, and right down the street from me, Clarence Reed would walk with his suitcase, and he lived right down the street from me. And I would wave and speak to him. He would walk. He didn't want to drive. He would ride the bus. If you want, he would always ride the bus. And he would walk down the street and disappear into wherever he lived in the house down, and he lived right down the street from it. Very peculiar gentleman, but very, very, very deep. I actually got on the bus with him one time just to see what he was all about, and he didn't want to speak a whole lot. But I said, "Man, you're something else. You're well known." He said, "Yeah, that's all right. All of that is fine." And I saw that he didn't want to be talked to a whole lot, and he just got off the bus and went his way, and got off the bus and went back home. But he's a very interesting man, prolific songwriter. Yes, and he lived right down the street from me.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's all these connections, right? You could bring up 100 names, and I'm sure you can find a connection somewhere with each of
John
them.
Edwards. I'm going to throw a name out. You remember the Spinners? You remember the Mighty Spinners? Right after Felipe Wynn left, after Felipe Wynn left the Spinners, there was a fellow in South Florida by the name of John Edwards. John Edwards was also a part of, I think it was the Prolifics. He used to do a lot of shows right there in South at a place called the Jetaway. The Jetaway. Some of the I knew very close friends of the owners of the original Jetaway, and you remember Timmy Thomas. Timmy Thomas was a very dear friend of mine. But anyway, a very close friend of mine. He actually taught. He became a instructor, a teacher, and he was my stepson's piano teacher in Miami, Carroll City High. So Timmy Thomas, John Edwards of the Spinners, winded up being with the Spinners. He's the one that did Cupid, Draw Back Your Bow, and all of the. He took over the spot for Felipe Wynn of the Mighty Spinners. John Edward, I had a chance to meet and talk with him personally. He had developed a very bad stroke some years ago, and I would do volunteer work at the VA hospital in Miami, and I would go in the auditorium, and they would wheel in, guess who? John Edwards. And I said, "Oh man, this is John Edwards," and I would come and I would, talk, shake hands with him and speak with him. He's done a lot better now. In fact, he's up in Georgia, and he's recovering. He speaks and he can talk, and he's still in a wheelchair, but at least I had a chance to meet and talk with him.
Yeah, it's good to see and hear. At least he's still alive, and that's important. So another label that was very prominent, may not have reached the heights of like a TK Records or some of the subsidiaries, but Deep City Records. Willie Clark. Did you ever have a chance to have any interactions with him?
No, sir, I did not. However, who did have interactions with Willie Clark, Brother Clark, was Paul Lewis. Paul Lewis, who is the young trumpet player of Casey and the Sunshine Band. He had direct connections with Mr. Clark, and they put together all type of events. To this day, and Paul is a very close friend of mine. A very close friend of mine. I'll give you another person I'd like to say a shout out to is Walter Orange. You might have seen a picture of me at his home. Walter Orange is the founding member of the Commodores. And
I knew the name was familiar, but I couldn't
Yes.
pinpoint what group?
I had an opportunity to go to his house and do recording. This is the project that I was telling you about that is still in flux. He allowed me to come to his house. He had a wonderful studio in his home, and he had me come up there and do recording, do all of my recording right there in his home. And you might see it on one of the slides. Walter Orange. Now Walter is he's a little under the weather now. He doesn't perform like he used to, but he has two sons. I went to his show a couple of months ago, right there at the Hard Rock, and the Commodores had a wonderful show. Most of the original musicians were there, but Walter wasn't because he was a little under the weather. But he has two twin sons who fill the gap very well.
And great opportunity to share some pictures here, some additional ones,
Sure.
and perhaps tell us a little bit about some of these different photos that we are getting the opportunity to look through here.
Sure.
So I got some real nice ones.
Oh my goodness. Look at that. That is the 5,000 role models. And that was when I was mentoring the 5,000 role models in Miami Gardens, Florida. And it was started by my congresswoman, Frederica Wilson. These are young boys that need, some of them, they all elementary school and junior, elementary school needed male leadership. And I was one of those guys who would help mentor all of these young kids. And Frederica Wilson, Congresswoman Frederica Wilson, was the innovator of that program.
I think that's a nice segue to
Oh yeah.
bring to to bring up that picture as well, and I'd love to share that here. So let me go ahead and
Oh,
bring up that picture.
it was a
Uh,
lot of fun with a lot of fun working with her. And you're talking about that hat. She's famous for that hat.
she is.
Oh yeah, she's very famous for that hat, but she is a wonderful, wonderful congresswoman, and I'm so proud of her. She's doing wonderful things even today, and that's me with her. And I said, Congresswoman, you just got to allow me to take a picture of you.
It's a great picture.
Oh yeah.
Have there been any other people, whether they're in politics or even some famous celebrity folks that you didn't realize were fans, but you had a chance to maybe meet them at one of your different shows you performed at?
Uh, you might find a picture of Joe Marie Payton. You might see a picture of me and Joe Marie Payton. The thing, and there's a story about Joe Marie Payton of Family Matters. Is this? She grew up there in Opelika. She grew up there in Opelika, Florida as well, and she did very well. She does a whole lot of different things right now, locally and nationwide. But Joe Marie doesn't remember this, but I believe, I want to say I was in the third grade, third or fourth grade. I think it was the third grade. And that teacher, that Miss Courtney, she had us do in the third grade, she had us do what is called pen pals. We all had to write a letter to all of the students over in elementary school in Opelika, Florida. And they wrote a pen pal, a letter back to us. The person that I got a letter from was a little girl, a girl by the name of Joe Marie Peyton. I don't know. I can't swear to it, but I remember writing a letter and getting a letter from a Joe Marie Peyton in the third grade. And I sent
Wow.
her a letter in the third grade for
It
family matters. And oh,
yeah.
goodness. Yeah.
It doesn't sound like a coincidence to me. It's
No, man, ain't no coincidence. No coincidence. I believe I remember the name and I remember the school. Hmm. And I won the spelling bee in the fourth grade
okay.
at Grandeur. Yeah.
I won a spelling bee, I think, in the third grade. So
Okay. Okay.
we share that in common.
Yeah.
Uh,
Right on, man.
uh, another photo that I like to share is and also a dear friend of yours, Jeffrey Reeves. Um,
Oh, Jeff. I got to tell you, I had the pleasure to meet Jeff. I was doing some shows with Sensations in Boca. I want to say in the mid 2000s, and we needed one more person. And this is how I met. He was, I guess he was off, not touring right then, or he had an off day or something like that. And sure enough, he came up to sing with us. So that's how I met Jeffrey Reeves. But I had no idea what kind of phenomenal guitar player and singer and entertainer he was until after the fact. Then I found him playing with KC. I found him playing with all of the local venues across the South, Jeff Reeves, and we lost him. Well, we lost him, but
yeah.
what a pleasant gentleman, very kind and humble fella.
I didn't know him that well, but
Hmm.
I was very close to getting him on the podcast.
Yeah,
I think it was maybe the first year or maybe early second year of the
yes,
podcast. We just couldn't figure out a good day that worked for the two of us. And then
yes.
unfortunately and very sadly he had passed away. And so I'm so glad you had the chance, Mel, because you knew him.
I had a chance to meet
Yeah,
and interact with Jeff, and I actually had to play with him a couple of times. Yeah.
very nice. Well, I'm glad you can share some of those memories.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, yeah, that's very special. Another picture I'd like to go ahead and share here. Talk about this one.
Oh my goodness. This is back in the way back. I think I was a platter. I think I was a platter back then. So at one of the venues in across the state when I was singing with my guys, Bobby Stringer and Mel Dancy and Betty Paget and Frankie Say, and they got caught a picture of me doing one of my lead songs, and there I am, man. That's a long time ago.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yes, sir.
All right, I have a couple more here. I'd love to bring up. Let's take a look here at this picture. I'll bring this one up right now. One second, it's a little bit of actually, one second. That wasn't the one that I was looking at. Yeah, this is the one. All right, I'm going to bring up this photo here. Let me share. One second.
I got a feeling I know which one you're going to bring up.
It's actually a bit of a collage picture.
Okay. Oh yes. Oh yes. The International Platters. The International Platters. That's me locally now. That's to your up to your top left was us doing a show as the International Platters in the Canary Islands with Mel Dancy and Chuck Roll and Tracy Dixon and Bobby Stringer. And then we did something over in Madrid, Benidorm's thing to your right. with the same group, the same setup, those guys. So yes, and this is me locally now, doing my thing now. Yes.
Yeah. Did you ever get a chance to return back to Europe and perform?
No, I did not. Once I set my feet on solid ground here in the U.S., I didn't go back to Europe. In fact, I've only done I want to say Mexico maybe once, Cancun once, and I did just the islands, just the islands a couple of times.
Okay.
Mhm.
Well, you mentioned
The story is still in the mix. It's
right,
still being told.
still writing your stories. So
Yes, sir.
there's that. And you mentioned a little bit ago when we were talking about sometimes getting around, hanging out with some of the other cats and going to like the VFW and smoking your pipe. And do have a picture of you and said pipe.
I actually have that pipe.
Ah,
That that pipe I still have down in my garage right now. That was, I want to say about 35 years ago. That is my cool daddy days when I thought I was I thought I was the man. That's when I thought I was the man.
that's a great picture. And it's
Yeah.
amazing you still have that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Still
Yeah.
have that pipe. I still have it.
Yeah, you still have that pipe.
Yes, sir.
Let's take a look at another photo here. I'm going to bring this one up. Give me one sec just to get it a little bit larger and tell us about this one, Mel.
Oh my goodness. This band, that's with the Bobby Nathan band, and I was doing a sit-in with those guys at one of the venues, and the guitar player's name is Steele, Anthony Steele, and I was just getting down. I think I was doing something. I'll be around, and I was just getting down, man, just having fun in a local venue in Coral Springs. Just sometimes folks will see me in the audience, and they would say, "There's Mel Williams in the audience. Let's get him up on stage." And I'm there to support them, and I wind up going to work. So that's how it goes, man.
I grew up in Coral Springs. Where was that at?
I, I,
It could
that was a
was
while back.
it could have been the Well, it had some different names, but there was a venue in Coral. There wasn't a lot of places you could play in Coral Springs. It was a Coral Springs Civic Center. There was a Coral Springs City Center. Then became like the Art Center. I don't know if it was that was the place that you
No,
may have
this
played.
was more one of the like supper club type
Oh, okay.
venues. It was like a restaurant supper club type place.
Ah, okay, got it.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, nice. Well, I'm glad that that triggered that memory there for you.
Oh yeah.
Have another one, which is one of my personal favorites, and I'm looking forward to hearing your story about this photo. It is not one that you may have shared with me already, so
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
a bit of a wild card here, Mel. Tell us about this one.
That's so funny. I was a bad man back then.
That's a that's a cool shot right there.
That's so funny. That we was doing some photo shoots for a friend of mine. Her name is Jessie Campo. She's a wonderful entertainer. She does a lot of shows locally and internationally as well. But I was doing a photo shoot with one of those guys for her, and this kind of popped up, and she says, "Man, come as a gangster." And guess what? That was easy because I had it all. Now that gun is not mine. The car is not mine. But the spats are mine. Those are my spats.
There you
So,
go.
yeah. Oh yeah.
something you might see on like the cover of like a hip hop album or in
Yeah,
like Harlem Nights or something like that.
that is so funny. I'm so glad. I'm so so amazed that you got that when you found that.
Yeah,
It's so
yeah,
funny.
that's definitely one that I think was worth
Oh
sharing
yeah,
here today.
worth showing. That's so.
Absolutely. I got a couple more here I want to share here with everyone. What are your memories of this picture?
Oh, Walter Orange,
Okay,
right
this is
there.
the one with Walter. Okay.
Walter right there sitting down to your stage left.
Right.
Walter Orange right there of the Commodores. That's in his studio in his home. To the right of Walter is my producer, and I can't think of his name anymore. But he's the one who was doing all the recording and editing. To the top left, the young lady, her name is Dee Pierce, great vocalist, great singer, great entertainer, great singer, and that's me. She is like my adopted daughter. She was always there for me. She's great vocalist, great background vocalist, and she was there in the studio with me on some of the cuts of the album that I'm still working on, that we were working on.
Did you ever get behind the board and do any producing yourself?
Not that much.
Hmm.
I've got a little makeshift studio here at the house, and I do enough. I've got it down packed, but not it good enough to refine, editing and engineering.
Right.
I can get the sound out there, but it takes some mastering, and that I
Yes.
can't. I haven't gotten to yet.
I feel like as the performer or as the one who's the musician, the other
Yes.
side of it is not always that fun part.
No, that's the hard part. The easy part is the singing. The hard part is making that singer sound good.
Yeah,
Yeah, man.
absolutely. I got another one here for you. We share this picture. What are your memories of this one?
Oh yeah, that was a live performance somewhere. I think I was in. I want to say. I want to say North Miami Beach, North in the Aventura area, and we were doing a live show somewhere, and they caught a picture of a young lady singing with me, and so many young female vocalists. I think her name was Violet. Violet. That was me doing my thing live. Uh-huh.
And that's another thing too. That's I think also a testament to the memory is
Yes.
you've worked with so many people
Oh
and
my
trying to
goodness.
remember. And again, it's no disrespect. There's people
No.
I may have worked with a year ago. I'm like,
Yes.
I
Yes.
know your name. It's just you're just
I,
having that moment. And I can only imagine going back in your Rolodex of how many people you've met over the course of your lifetime. It's a
yes.
lot.
Sometimes I can't remember. Jeff, I got to tell you, sometimes I can't remember all of my lyrics anymore.
I can
At my
understand.
age, I'm approaching. I'm under 80. I'm under 80, but I'm midway. I'm
Yeah,
midway in the 70s, so I don't remember all of the names, all of the venues, and all of the places. But I do have fond memories of the past. You know.
absolutely. And again, that's a testament to having a very strong memory and thinking back to these moments where, again, we're talking how many years ago some of these folks may have come in and out of your life. So it's amazing you can even remember as many as you do. So,
Yes, I think I probably sang my first song on my first stage. I was probably about 8 or 9, 7 or 8 years old. So I've got to say I've been singing for over 66 years somewhere.
right, somewhere in that range.
Yes, yes. And
Well, let,
I thank goodness I'm able to keep going. It keeps me young. Hmm.
Absolutely. I can only imagine
Yeah,
it would have that effect,
yeah.
and it's great that you're still out there doing your thing. And I'm gonna share one more photo here with everyone, and I am willing to share if there's any others you want me to do bring up. What are your memories of this one?
Oh, Robbie Williams. His name is Robbie Williams. We've lost him. We lost him during the COVID situation. But Robbie Williams and I were very, very dear friends. We used to call us the Williams boys, the Williams guys. And he would get up and do his thing, and Mel would do his thing. Robbie Williams was a great entertainer. He played locally, all of the local venues down here in South Florida. One place was Gatsby's. He also played uh, Murphy's, where he plays constantly at Murphy's. I winded up playing when he passed away. I wind up filling in for him at Murphy's right here after he passed away. Rest in peace, Robbie Williams.
I know that when Eddie and Derry came on from Mirror, they mentioned playing shows at Gatsby's. Did you ever see any shows there yourself?
I played Gatsby's on a regular basis. I played Gatsby's right there in Hollywood, right on Hollywood Boulevard. I played there on them. I did what was called Motown Mail Mondays, Motown Monday Mail, and we had a nice little crowd in there every so often. And then I would have guest vocalists come in and fill in. We had a lot of fun. I want to give a shout out, and I filled in how I started there at Gatsby's. There was a group called uh, Eric and the Jazzers. Eric and the Jazzers. Heads up to Eric and the Jazzers. And told me they needed someone to fill in on Monday nights because there was a fellow by the name of Joey Gilmore. We just lost Joey just recently. We just lost Joey recently, but Joey Gilmore was playing there on Monday night, and Joey was getting too busy, so they needed someone to fill in, and they asked me to come in and fill in. I had a chance to sing and fill in with Joey a couple of times. Joey Gilmore, hats off to him, and that's how I winded up at Gatsby's on Monday nights doing mail Monday Motown Mail Mondays at
Triple
Gatsby.
Mo,
Yeah,
Triple M.
yeah,
Nice.
blah blah. Yeah, man.
Very neat. And yeah, and rest in peace to Joey Gilmore. I'm a big
Yeah,
fan of a lot of his work too. And and so many people, as I imagine, obviously the older you get, the more and more folks are gonna
oh yeah,
sadly pass on.
yeah,
And I know for yourself, so many people that you either grew up with or you worked with, whether it would be
yeah,
professional or personal level,
yes,
may no longer be here, but they're
right,
still with you. I imagine you keep them here, right? So
right. I keep them. I wish I had a list of all of the artists that I had an opportunity to work with. And I got to tell you, Lauren Carter is one of them. There's a young lady, there's just so many artists from now to back in the day that I had an opportunity to sing with. And if I forgot their names, I got to tell you, I apologize. There's so many artists, Lauren Carter, Kadash Cornelius. You remember the Cornelius brothers and the
yeah,
Sister
Sister
Roses.
Rose, right? Yep.
I sang with their daughter. Her name is Kadash Cornelius, a wonderful entertainer. So many, I just can't think of them all. But
Yeah.
I'll get in trouble because I forgot all of their names.
See, I didn't realize there was a connection to the Cornelius brothers and Sister Rose. I think they were out of Dania, if I'm not mistaken.
Dania, Florida, right
Yeah.
there. Yes.
Did you
Oh,
ever? Oh, did you ever
speaking
perform at
of,
like? Did you ever perform or see anything at Dania Hialeah?
I played at Dania Hialeah with my band, the Mel Williams and Company. You just when you said Dania, you just hit a name, Dee Dee Wild, the incomparable Dee Dee Wild, and the Broomfield brothers, Ben Broomfield. I want to talk about Vince Broomfield. I want to talk about their brother Eugene Wild, the singer who did Eugene Wild, who had a hit back in the day. Dee Dee Wild, and my old drummer Teddy Williams, uh, so many people, the guitar players, Ben Broomfield. So yes, and Dee Dee Wild, the great Dee Dee Wild. Speaking of Dee Dee Wild, who was a good friend of Dee Dee Wild, the wonderful, incomparable Donna Allen, who was the second runner-up on The Voice, who I did so many shows with Dee Dee Wild, and I also did many shows with the incomparable Donna Allen. So yes, there's a few of the other names that I had an opportunity to bring up.
Every little bit helps
Oh,
to tell and uncover
it
another story, you know, that
yes,
connects.
sir. Yes, sir. The Broomfields and Eugene Wild and so many fans, so many friends, so many
Right.
connections.
Now, I know I said before I was only going to bring up one last photo, but I lied. I want to bring up one last one because I want to end with a photo of you.
Okay.
So I have one last photo and one of my personal favorites. You just have it's the one with the car, the gangster look had its own level of cool, but I think this picture has a whole nother level of cool as well. Maybe you can tell us about it.
Uh, oh my goodness. The Kango hat.
Yeah.
I think I was at the Elks Lodge right there
In Fort Lauderdale?
in Fort Lauderdale, right there on 6th Street. Uh, anybody that everybody had to stop in and come through the Elks Lodge. It was I believe that was the Elks Lodge back in the day. It's closed now. And before we do close, Studio 183. Any and everyone that came to South Florida had to go to Studio 183. Stars from all stars had to. I actually had the pleasure of welcoming Nancy Wilson, the legend Nancy Wilson, introducing her to the audience at Studio 183 back in the day. So yeah, good old days, man.
What a cool story.
Oh yeah.
So speaking of the studios, did you ever get a chance to go into or do anything in Criteria?
Didn't I didn't go into criteria. I know it was not too far away, but I never did get there. In Kanye, I mean, a lot of my friends were there, went there, but not myself. Uh-huh.
I know that other people have come on the podcast have just shared stories about just
Mhm.
whether you recorded there or not, but just walking
Just get there,
the
just get
building,
through there.
you can almost feel the
Went there, I
history.
went by there, but never got in there.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Well,
It wasn't too far from a place called uh, Ace Music, where all of the instruments and studio equipment wasn't too far away. There I hung out. I lived in there when I was young, but as a young adult, no, I never
right,
did make it inside criteria.
right. But you were a hop, skip, and a jump from where it
I was a
was.
hop, skip, and a jump. Yes, sir.
Well, I could sit here and talk to you for probably another 5 hours, Mel.
Yes, sir. Yes. Yeah.
It's just been an honor and a pleasure to get a chance to have you on the podcast, to hear your story going back from the earliest beginnings where you were in church performing a Righteous Brothers song. Fast forward how many years later, and you're playing with members of the Righteous Brothers. I
Yes.
mean,
Yes, watching the kid as a kid watching the Platters
right,
on on TV and winding up being a part representing the
Amazing. What a cool
amazing.
story. What a cool story.
That's a blessing.
Yeah, it really came full circle, and but it's a testament to your work ethic and your networking and your talent, of course.
Well, thank you so much.
So it's just very grateful to have this opportunity to chat with you. And as we get ready to close things out, I'd love to give you the last word. Any final thoughts you'd like to share with viewers, listeners out there? The floor is yours to take us home.
Take about 10 seconds to say, first of all, you see on TV where at the Oscars or somebody wants to say, I want to thank you, Lord. I am going to thank you, Lord, for this opportunity to be able to tell my story. My story, thank God, is going to be archived forever, and I'm grateful for that. I thank you, Jeff, for the opportunity to do it. All of you artists, old and young, and those coming to be artists, you are blessed. You've been given a talent. You've been given a gift. Use it. Don't hide it. Share it. That's all I've got to say. God bless you all. Thank you so much. Mwah! Mwah! And thank you, Jeff.